You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. And make sure you subscribe to this podcast, the Storm Tracker podcast, on all platforms. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel as well, live from Canes County. And today I have Larry Blustein, South Florida reporter, joining me for a Blu Monday. How's it going today, Blu?
I'm doing good, Marcus. Thanks so much. And obviously, what we're learning a lot more is nothing is predictable in the ACC. And that's, just when people at the beginning of the year want to start saying, well, we'll beat them, we'll lose to them. Things are kind of thrown out the window because here's a Boston College who almost beat FSU, beat the same Georgia Tech team that Miami lost to. Miami turns around, beats Clemson. So it's nothing is for sure. And as we find out, here's Pitt, who beat Louisville 2 weeks ago, and everyone's talking about how invincible they are. So it's the only thing for sure is Virginia's next week.
Yeah, that is the one thing that is for sure. I mean, college football is college football, right? It just is constantly changing. And I always laugh at these analysts when they try to put teams in a championship game at this point of the season.
Yeah.
Because, college, this happens every year. It's almost like they have amnesia of what's happened over the past, 50, 60, 70 years. It always changes. Teams always fall off. And one of those teams that fell off or seems to have fallen off is Clemson, as Miami knocked them off last Saturday, 28-20 in double overtime. Blu, you're usually in the press box with me, and we're, kind of discussing the game together. But this time you're in the stands, with a buddy of yours. So you had a different perspective. You got to hear what the fans thought, especially in that first half. I mean, we heard the boos from the press conference, but what was your perspective from the stands?
Well, it's a whole different, and I haven't done it a lot in my career is to sit in a fan setting like that. I think the last time I was in the fan stands for a game was the Orange Bowl when Miami played Wisconsin. And, that was the last time. And a friend of mine had a big Clemson fan, even though we were sitting in predominantly Miami. But you hear a lot, especially in the first half, is, things that we may not hear in the press box, like, get rid of Mario and this is not going to work. And then all of a sudden in the second half, tunes changed. I mean, you're going with a freshman quarterback with really taking very few significant snaps, who probably prepared but didn't prepare as much as if he knew he was 100% going to start. I think the coaching staff kind of had an idea about that before, probably a couple of days ago, knowing that Tyler Van Dyke probably wouldn't be ready. And I think the defense played really well. You still got to remember, though, even though Clemson's fallen off, that they've got dudes, they're big up front. Defensively, they're very active. They fly to the ball. They have a good running back. They have, a quarterback in Klubnik who's also still trying to feel his way through. So, you had kind of two similar teams, but Miami had more to fight for. They had lost to Georgia Tech in a game that really should never have been a loss. They lost at North Carolina, where they kind of started giving things away in the second half with turnovers. So there was a little bit of doubt, and everybody was saying, whoa, no, this can't be another 6-6 or 7-5 team. We got to go to a bowl. We've got to kind of continue to improve every week. And this was a huge game, bigger than most people think. More so from Miami than Clemson. because Clemson's been there, done that. They've had that reputation. I mean, they're going to recruit off of, what they've done in the past. And Miami still doesn't have a immediate past. And this was so important for Miami to come out with a W in this game. And as I said, as they approach Virginia, they could become bowl eligible. And that's something of a first step. It's not the definitive, it's not the holy grail, but it is a step that Miami needs to take, to keep in the, in the spotlight. And they're getting a lot of national games, which is perfect for recruiting. They're getting a lot of national games where kids and analysts and people could see, this program is definitely on the, on the rise. I mean, and I keep reiterating, and I don't want to be beating a dead horse, but I think sometimes you've got to kind of make not only the fan base and the boosters, but the media sometimes loses fact that how poor Miami's roster was last year and what they were faced in doing in the offseason and trying to get frontline players. Forget about depth. They were trying to get frontline starters, which they did on the offensive line and a couple of other spots. So I'm at the belief that, I understand it, and there's a few people do like yourself, but there's not, everybody wants to kind of quick react and knee jerk all the time, but you have to understand where Miami came from, last year to where they are now. And I think it's a significant growth. And with this positive recruiting class that we had in this past class, and then working towards in this next class, along with probably much needed transfer portal kids, things could be a whole lot different next year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you talk about last year, they only won 5 games. This year, they've already won 5 games.
Yeah.
So that kind of already kind of tells you where they are as far as comparing it to last year. And, Miami's on the right track. Cristobal is definitely pushing this team and program in the direction where it needs to be. And I think the fan base just needs to be patient. I mean, just like they needed to be patient in that game Saturday night.
Because true.
In the first
Tale
half,
of two halves.
Right, exactly. In the first half, they were already booing because there was too many bubble screens, I'm sure. But they were just trying to get Emory Williams kind of going in this game. I mean, he was a true freshman making his first college start. I mean, last year he was in high school in the Panhandle, where it's not really high level high school football compared to South Florida. So it was going to take some time for him to kind of get his feet wet in this game. And the fan base wasn't necessarily patient with that, but hey, patience kind of paid off in this game. But the biggest takeaway, before we even get into Emory Williams, which I'll ask you about his performance, I just want to share my biggest takeaway in this game, and that is that Miami has really significantly upgraded their team when it comes to the trenches. When it comes to the offensive and defensive line, this team is night and day when it comes to last year. And you talked a little bit about the depth as well. Miami's got plenty of depth on that defensive line, and they have depth at linebacker now. That was a position of concern for Miami for years, since the days of Quarterman, McLeod, and Pinckney are no longer on the team. So that was the biggest takeaway for me. Blue, what was your biggest takeaway from this game?
Well, a lot what you saw. And I mean, and people have been writing Corey Flagg off for 3 years, but all he does is make big plays. Exactly. And that kind of shows you at that position with Mawanoa's brother, who, I mean, he's a real godsend to this team. He makes big plays. He's one of those dudes that you say, if he was playing for Oregon or Washington, or they say, oh man, we got to get a kid like that. and now they do. And Wesley Basaint, who has been inconsistent, there's no doubt. Everybody knows he's come up. But the great thing about it is you have a good defensive front seven now, and that helps facilitate some of the growth in the secondary. The Davis kid has filled in admirably and made some plays. Obviously, both the Browns are still feeling their way. Darryl Porter Jr. has had a really good year. So I think the growth on the defensive side, and, you could look at Coach Guidry and say, you know what, here's a guy who is working miracles with what he has. I mean, truthfully, this isn't Ohio State. This isn't Alabama. This isn't a team that has three of everything. This is a team that, as you said, they've added depth in certain places and defensively at the linebacker position and up front where they can interchange guys at the defensive end spot. So, and on offense, and we'll talk about Tyler in just a minute. I think what Miami's doing now on the offensive line or the offense is utilizing the offensive line. And they've played so well this year. And again, listen, Clemson, their defensive line, I think they're like collecting Social Security. They're all graduate guys. They're numerous games started at high level. So Miami more than did their job, and paved the way in the second half and gave them an opportunity. Obviously when people criticize the quarterbacks, not just with Emory, but what TVD does by going to Restrepo a lot, why wouldn't you? He catches the ball. He gets open. No, he's not going to take it 80 yards for a touchdown, but all it takes is 10 yards for a first down. And if you continue to get those, and, that'll open things up for everybody else. And the guy that I'm really, really happy about this year that's finally getting a chance to show what he's all about is Brashard Smith. He's a big play guy. He's one of the fastest kids on the team. And that's the one thing. A lot of these, Ray Josephs, and, they're going to ease their way into more and more playing time as time goes on. But, my assessment is that what took place on Saturday evening at Miami was kind of where Miami is at. They're still searching for the identity, and a game like that, you can't say enough about how, what people still regard as Clemson as one of the top teams in the country. So, nailing down a fifth win, something, as you alluded to, that they didn't do last year, until late, and they had to hold on and wish for a bowl game. Well, that could come this Saturday.
Yeah, it definitely could. It's definitely going to be a tough game. Larry Blustein joining me here on the Storm Tracker podcast. The controversy in this game before it started was whether Tyler Van Dyke was even going to start this game or not. He was a game time decision. Emory Williams took the first team reps all week, but he has done that before, leading up to the game. But Tyler Van Dyke has started every game this season. But in pregame warmups, he didn't come out. And that was kind of the indication that it was going to be Emory Williams. What was your assessment of the true freshman's play? And do you think we have a quarterback controversy once Tyler Van Dyke returns?
Well, let's tackle the first part. I thought that he, the really good quarterbacks learn. And as you said, this was his first start. And he didn't really have the all week to solely prepare to be the starter. Yeah, he probably took more snaps than he usually does, but he still didn't. Nobody really knew, until the last couple of days. So I give him credit. Came out, was a little bit shell-shocked early. But again, that Clemson defense is pretty good. They hit you, they fly, great linebacker play. So I thought he did really well coming out. And I think what happened was you got to kind of, credit Shannon Dawson as well for probably getting with him in the corner at halftime and say, okay, let's go over what happened here in the first half and let's try to, cut down on the mistakes and, and try to scour the field instead of locking on a receiver. And that's one thing that unfortunately TVD was doing the last couple of weeks is, locking on a receiver and not going through his progression. But thought he did that. And to your second part, I don't think there's a controversy. You still need that senior leadership. And, I'm sure he's going to get plenty of time to get in there, whether Tyler's healthy or not, he's going to probably scoot him in, in the second half. And, that to me, and it doesn't really take away continuity because, your objective is the same thing. It's not like this is going to be a two-headed quarterback for the future. It's sort of like getting your kid ready for your number one ready for next year. And I, getting a chance to play against a Virginia team. And I'm not going to say anything that they're not good but on paper, they're a lesser program than what Miami's played this year. They've had big wins, but Miami's going to be ready for this game. They have, if Emory has to play again and start again, he's more equipped to do it. And certainly the road is never going to be easy for this team the rest of the year.
Yeah, definitely. Miami's going to, have to continue to play well against these ACC teams. And the ACC, as we kind of see, is a different ball game. And they struggled against Georgia Tech. So every game it is going to be tough. And I think, it's a game that Miami is going to take very seriously coming Saturday. Last thing on the Clemson game, though, Clemson, I don't know what you think about their offense. I mean, it didn't get to really kind of speak to you about the game, but that their offense just didn't look good. But was it Miami making their offense not look good, or was it just a lack of execution? Because I don't know if you heard in the post game press conference with Dabo Sweeney, even that on that last play, said that the quarterback Cade Klubnik took the ball and kind of I guess freestyled the play and didn't run the exact play. So do you think Miami won this game, or do you think Clemson lost this game?
Combination of both things. I think that Clemson came in thinking, we could play an average game and still win. I mean, they watched the game last week when Miami pretty much handed it to North Carolina after playing a really solid first half. You saw them lose to Georgia Tech. Whether it was one play or not, I think when you watch film, it's over an entire body of a game and not just predicated on one play or two plays. So, and then let's credit Miami's defense. They were there. They made plays. I mean, obviously, Klubnik had some balls that were overthrown to wide open guys. But that sometimes, could be because of a pass rush. And, and that's the one thing Miami's probably worked on as much as anything is to try to, get the interior going. And with Bain, they did. I mean, this is one of those guys that, I remember back in the day with Warren Sapp and Butch Davis and Jimmy Johnson both telling me that, wow, this is a guy that disrupts. You have to hold him out in practice sometimes because he just won't let us get any work done. And I think Bain is that type of guy. This is somebody by the end of this year, going in the next year, will not only be regarded as one of the best interior defensive linemen in the ACC, but you got to figure he's going to be a top prospect or top person nationally. And guys like him and Leonard Taylor and, the defensive ends, and certainly, as I mentioned, with the linebackers, they're all progressing in a way where I think that, they're taking that leadership. And I just think they've come so far. And you're going to see next year that this roster that you see now will change even more. And yeah, I mean, you've seen, Marcus, firsthand what can happen when the transfer portal takes hold. Look, it's happened in programs like USC over the last couple of years or the last 2 years, and some of these other teams that have benefited. Florida State, both of their wide receivers were portal kids, a running back, a linebacker. So the complexion of your team changes, but it's good to know that you have a nucleus of young kids who are aboard now that are getting a baptism and a good baptism.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So this week we've got Virginia on the docket, and Virginia pulls out an upset against North Carolina last week. It's the wide, crazy world that is the ACC and that is college football. A one-win team beats an undefeated team at home. And Miami just left Chapel Hill with a loss. So I think Virginia beating North Carolina is probably the best thing to happen to Miami, because now Miami is totally, not going to underestimate Virginia, especially after a big win after Clemson. I think it's a very winnable game for Miami if they control the trenches, just like they did in this game. I am thoroughly surprised that Miami held Clemson to basically a yard. Per carry, which is unbelievable with those two NFL-worthy backs they have in the backfield. Will Miami avoid the trap against Virginia?
Wow. Yeah. Well, this is going to be an emotional game from a lot of standpoints. Deshaun Perry, who passed last year tragically, this is a game where I think they're going to honor his family, before the game, even though it's a Miami home game. Obviously, he's a Gulliver product, and I think it's going to be emotional for Virginia on that standpoint, because there's going to be a lot of family and friends in the stand. So what Miami needs to do is come out and forget about last week's game. Forget about the North Carolina and concentrate one game at a time, which I think when teams lose, Marcus, sometimes they kind of look past the opponent. And I think maybe that's what happened with Clemson or North Carolina last week. They look past Virginia. I don't think that Miami's going to look past this team. They're not an 11-0 team where they could just say, you know what, roll it out. They know that the pitfalls, and you're right. I think 100% you're right. I think they're going to take the focus, the preparation of this game like it's Clemson, like it's A&M, like it's one of those higher opponents, because if you don't, you're going to get slapped. And Miami only has this game in Louisville at home, and the rest of them are going to be on the road. And that means NC State. I know people laugh at Boston College, but they beat the same Georgia Tech team that you lost to. So obviously those games are going to be, tests. Florida State is not going to be a joke. So you got to win. You got to win this week. You got to get bowl eligible, and then keep taking it one game at a time. And that's just what has to happen. There's, again, the fans got to be fans, and I understand that. But the players and the team cannot get caught up in that. Oh well, when we beat this team and beat that, no, you got to play Virginia. If anything, like you said, didn't wake you up, it's that game where they won last week in Chapel Hill, a place where Miami looked pretty crazy in the second half. So, but turnovers are everything. And we find that out, that if you lose the turnover margin, you're going to lose the game. And so it's on any given Saturday, and certainly Miami has the full focus on Virginia. And now you almost bet that Mario Cristobal is not going to let it be any other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Miami won the turnover battle, of course, last Saturday. As we've seen in ACC play, once they win the turnover battle or lose it, that pretty much is an indication of how the game will turn out. Miami already opening as an 18-point favorite at home next week against Virginia. You got 5 games left here, Blue. I do want to just kind of ask real quick before we jump into some recruiting stuff. You got 5 games left here. You got a Virginia, you got an NC State, Florida State, Louisville, Boston College. All tough teams, in my opinion. All teams that can beat you on any given Saturday. With the team now 5-2, what do you think will be the record after, or the win total after the season is over? This is like barring the bowl season, so not taking into account the bowl game. Out of those 5 games, how many games do you think they end up with W's?
Well, I say that at the beginning of the year, I said Miami would finish 7-5, and that was looking at a loss against Texas A&M, but certainly a win against Georgia Tech. I mean, so far they've pretty much done what I thought. I think this week should take them to 6 wins.
Yeah,
NC State on the road is not going to be easy. I mean, any game, like you alluded to, is not going to be easy. Certainly Florida State's not going to be easy. The Louisville home game, we see how Louisville could play. They beat Notre Dame senseless. So, I mean, that's, but then again, then they lost to Pitt. So and then Boston College, when they first, said, hey, listen, the teams that we're going to be playing this next year, instead of playing Virginia Tech, that will be Clemson and Boston College. I said, wow, Miami's track record at Boston College isn't really great. I mean, especially it's going to be a little bit chillier. It's in that, at the end of November. So my only thing to tell you there is I'm not going to back off on my 7-5. Because of the fact that, I still think there's some games there, like I said, with Florida State, NC State, and Louisville that Miami could lose. But then as we're finding out, they could also lose, NC State could also lose Virginia and Boston College. But, it's tough. I still say that I figured that they'd be 7-5. And I said it at the beginning, and people were chastising me and say, oh, but on what basis were you going to give them 9 and 10 wins? I mean, it was like a completely new team, so you didn't really know what they were capable of until they took the field in the opening game, against Miami of Ohio. So, but you know what? I kind of don't want to be a hypocrite and saying, give you a 7-5 record when I said, every week you got to take one game at a time. So I'll say they win this week, and then we concentrate on the next game. And but this week is vital because it gives them a bowl game, at least a bowl bid, and they'll get it because there was a lot of 5-7 teams last year that were teetering on getting like Rice and programs like that. So I think definitely, right now you approach that Virginia game, it's going to be. Like I said, it's all those games. Everybody wants to beat Miami. You know that. The fact that they haven't won significantly in well over 20 years doesn't matter. It's just that you on the side of the helmet, all those guys that have played in the NFL that are still very much. And let me just say that was a great little ring of the ceremony for Jimmy Johnson and obviously Dennis Erickson, and somebody who I had an opportunity to watch play when I was growing up, and Chuck Foreman, who a lot of people I don't realize in this society understands what a big part he was to that program. Back in the day, and then what he meant as an NFL player, always wearing that University of Miami mantra on his shoulder that, hey, he came from like Ted Hendricks and people like that people don't understand were a huge part of this program. And, and people, and then I can understand if you're, in your 30s, 40s, and even into the 50s that you don't remember players like that, but you got to respect them, and what they did. And all you have to do is, look back in the day when, when this growth of the program, Miami was getting a lot of kids from outside the area. He wasn't a really highly recruited player out of Fredericksburg, Maryland, but when he got here, you could see. I mean, he was different than what Miami was getting in the past. In fact, his senior year, they even had him as a wide receiver because he thought that would help them greatly. But it was so good to see him, and obviously Dennis Erickson and then Jimmy Johnson, and especially those two coaches who were the most successful in the history of the school. Yeah. And gave that team prominence and the U that everybody kind of respects today, doing part of what they did. So that was a great Ring of Honor ceremony. I enjoyed that immensely as well.
Yeah, it was really nice to see those guys. It was staggering to see their record because both coaches only had 9 wins apiece. And Cristobal already has 9 wins to his record with a year and a half. Just to kind of put it in perspective, it's no knock on Cristobal at all. It's more It's more so just what they did for this program. I mean that era is what I grew up watching.
Right.
Watching the Jimmy Johnson and then Dennis Erickson era. It was great to see them in the Ring of Honor. Well deserved. For sure. Right before we get you out of here, got to talk a little bit of recruiting. And Miami unfortunately lost a 5-star in recruiting that would have been in the 2024 class because he reclassed.
Right.
If you are following us on CanesCounty.com, you probably knew that he was going to reclass as we were putting that on the message board. I want to say maybe 2 months ago, something like that.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah. So
it's old news.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It just finally kind of came to light to the public. But flipping to Florida State's gotta hurt. And people on the message board are asking, do we expect any more decommits coming based on their 5-2 season? I kind of laughed at it because I'm just like, do you remember what the record was last year? It was 5-7, and they had a top 10 class. And this year, they're clearly a better team. They're clearly rebuilding. How do you think this recruiting class will end up, despite, I guess, the record not living up to Miami fans or maybe recruits' expectations?
Yeah. Well, the way I look at it, Marcus, is to me, if you're judging what the record is in 2023, you're not the athlete we want. We want you to understand what the future is going to be about. And that's where you landed people like Duke Johnson and players of that caliber because they wanted to be Hurricanes. They wanted to be part of this. They weren't going to let 1 loss or 2 losses sway them in 2023 when they weren't even part of it. All they understand is that next year when they come here, they've got an opportunity to get in the mix, and they're looking right now at guys like Bain. They're looking at guys like Ray. They're looking at Mauanoa. You're looking at all these guys who were in high school last year at this time, and they see that they're playing significant roles at a Power 5 school in the ACC, and that to me, rather than you say, well, I'm going to commit to Georgia or Alabama or those programs and sit for 2-3 years. And why would you want to do that? And I made a comment the other day on the pregame show on the WQAM, and that I thought that somebody like Brandon Innes made a huge mistake. He should have come to Miami because he would have been in every freaking game. He would have been significant. And here he is at Ohio State as a role player, and they recruited 4 more guys that are pretty good at wide receiver. So, to me, I think when you look back, and I think that Mark Fletcher saw that same thing, he knew that if he came to Miami, that with the way their running game was like in flux, and there wasn't anybody who really stepped to the head of the class, that he'd have an opportunity, and he has. And that's part of what I see out of this class coming up. I see a bunch of guys that figure, hey, you know what? We come in the spring or whenever they come in, most likely in the spring. And, hey, we've got a shot by the time things roll around in August to be right in the 2 or 3 deep, which is great because you're going to get in a major college situation less than a year when you went to prom or you didn't go to prom. And I thought, when you take a look at those graduations from high school and those proms, those guys have already had 4 months in college, and then they go back to their schools to graduate with their class. And I think it's so overblown. I think, and I know that this is not going to be a popular statement, but the fan base has got to back off. They're always on these kids. They're harassing them, and they're only young kids. What are they going to do? I mean, if you, a fan, were harassed for every decision that you ever made, it wouldn't be a very comfortable life. So, let things play out. Give everybody a chance to breathe. And what Armando did, you got to remember, Armando had kind of a strange career because he started in high school as an 8th grader, at Dillard, and certainly was on the radar screen way before a lot of these guys were. He was rated as a number 1 or 2 player in the 2025 class nationally at the beginning. He's one of the top 2 or 3 shot putters in the country for his age group. So what happened was Florida State happened to won that battle, but they're not going to win. Miami's going to win plenty of battles, and I would let things go. Don't be, harassing the kid on social media. I mean, that's, he's 17 years old. Let him take a step back.
Yeah. I actually think he's 16 years old.
16.
Yeah, because he's 25. He's a
right.
Just turned to 24 recruit, but yeah. Great stuff from you, Larry, as always. How can others kind of find more information on stuff that you do?
Well, we have LarryBlustein.com, which kind of does Dayton, Broward. Then we do Prep Red Zone Florida, which is the entire state. And we have a lot of good stuff, not just myself, but the other writers there. They kind of do a lot of recruiting stuff. And then we're on every Monday night at 8:30 on the Canes, the 6 Ring Canes podcast, which is pretty informative. I have a lot of guests and stuff. And then we have a radio show that's every week. I can't definitively give you what day because we kind of dance around the Miami Heat and the Panthers. But this week it's on Thursday night, 6 to 8. And that's it. I mean, you could hit me. I'm on social media, use a lot of Twitter, use a lot of Facebook, and our Instagram account as well. We put a lot of photos up there, a lot of good nostalgic stuff, that I have a collection of things from back in the 50s, 60s, 70s where old time Hurricane fans, seem to like stuff that we put up. So it's, there's always ways to get me. And if you have a recruit that you want us to promote, I don't care what level they are, we'll get them.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff as always. I love all that historic stuff that you put up as well. It's great stuff from you. You can follow Larry at Larry Blustein on Twitter. You see his Twitter handle right there for our YouTube viewers. That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you follow this podcast on all platforms and also subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Most importantly, subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, part of the rivals.com network. Until the next episode.